Hello everybody, welcome back to the Nocturnal Gaming Network. My name is Xeriua, and today we are playing Spaceflight Simulator once again. And today we are going to be doing a very complicated and very in-depth mission. We're going to be going to Mars, and we are going to be putting seismic and geologic sensors on Mars and all of its moons. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to go straight to the build, and we are going to look at what I want to do for these sensors. So basically, we need a couple things. We need a bunch of different bunch of different probe cores here. Let's just take out all of them right now. 3. I think we're going to need 4 for the main chip, and then let's actually do the sensor over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using these docking ports as docking ports first off, but then also as pieces for the seismic sensor. So we're going to sort of throw something together like this. We're going to put another one of these up here just like this, and then we're going to throw that on. That way it looks like it's sort of got a little dish on top. Then we want to go to electrical, and I'm going to put a battery and then 2 RTGs on this thing. And there we go. That is going to be the sensor that we'll be dropping on all of our target locations here. So then we need to actually go through and discuss what we're going to be doing for the ship here. To help space this out, I'm going to start with a fairing. I'm going to throw the fairing as high up as possible. And then we're going to just sort of do this here, where basically we want to skip our way up to the maximum size. Which I think we're going to want to use that right there. And I think this is going to be our fairing. And we're starting with the fairing to help space this out. Ooh, excuse me for a second. My brightness just changed for whatever reason. I don't know why. But it does that every so often. There's no reason for it to have. Alright, so we're back here. We're going to put, first off, a couple of parachutes on this, and then a separator. Basically, this right here is going to be the final stage. What we want is for this probe core to return to Earth here. Wow, I need to be able to talk. All right. That's the idea. This probe core is going to return to Earth. It's going to drop all the scientific data because, there's no humans or anything to return to Earth here. So we want to be able to actually get the data. Now, we need some sort of vehicle to actually return us to Earth should the worst happen. So that's going to be the next thing. Going to go back to utility. And here we are. This really basically will be the vehicle to return us to Earth if, the worst case scenario happens and we lose our mothership that we're going to be working with. Now, for our landing on Mars, fuel is going to be fairly tight, so we're going to want definitely want some parachutes. And we're basically going to be landing a craft, detaching this top portion here, and then sending that back home while we leave the rest of the lander in orbit. Not in orbit, but on the surface. Or we may use it to launch a little bit. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work yet. But that's going to be this portion right here. And then we're going to go to aerodynamic. Bam. Do something just like this. Now this is going to look a little bit strange when we actually go through. And I'll just take and throw the fairings off to the side here for a second. So we can sort of see what's going on here. There we go. see the craft in all of its glory. This is going to be the beginnings of the landing craft here. And we're going to set those up, and then we're going to go back to utility, because a lot of this takes place in the utility tab. And we basically want to use these struts here, just to give us a little extra length here for the landing gears, because we're going to grab each of these sensors and hold on to them down below the craft. Put a couple of thrusters on this thing, and then we can put the actual docking port right there. Put some more RCS thrusters on it to hopefully keep it even when we're using those in space. Alright, so this assembly right here is going to be the landing craft. This is what's going to land on all of the moons and on Mars itself. And basically, do the vast majority of the work. Next, we're going to put a mothership in orbit here. And we need a little bit of stuff here for the mothership, because basically the point of this thing is going to be to float around in orbit and provide fuel, provide a platform with which to, launch everything off. Something like this. We definitely want some RCS thrusters on this thing. I'm thinking like right here and right there. Oh, come on, go down one click. There we are. So this is going to be the main fuel tank, the big major fuel tank here. We're going to put a big docking port on this, because I feel like the way the big docking port works, it actually has less issues with it when you're going through and actually using the docking ports. But it may not. It may just be my opinion here. And the other docking port, the small docking port, definitely will work if you want to use that. I just prefer the bigger docking port, I think. I want to actually raise this up one more square. Right there, just so the engines are nice and even on the center of the mass of this thing. Alright, so next we're actually going to work on these little capsules here, the little geological sensors, let's call them. So I'm going to sort of set this thing up down here, and I'm going to use it to copy the required pieces so we can nice and easily make our little thing. We need 3 of them because Mars has 2 moons, so that's 1 for each moon and 1 for Mars itself. Come on, you can do it. There we go, now I can zoom in. And because we're going to be grabbing the sensors with this bottom docking port that's connected to the top of the mothership, what we need to do is flip these around 180 degrees, because if we don't do that, then we're not going to be able to easily actually grab these. We're going to have to go through and do stuff to flip them around, and I don't have time for that. So what we're going to do here is just flip everything around prior to putting it on the ship. Alright, here we are. So the way we do this is we select the piece, hit the back arrow, it puts the piece back. And then we can just take and throw the piece in place. Be careful not to hit the rotate arrow, because if you do, it's going to rotate the piece instead of putting it back where it belongs, and then you're going to have to basically do it again here, which it's not really that much of a big deal, but this is a nice, easy way to do this. So, if you, there it is, I just rotated it instead of hitting the back arrow. There we go. If you make, too many mistakes in an easy process, it may be harder to do the easy process than it would be to just do the normal hard process. So, if you've got something that's easier, you want to be efficient. That way it actually stays, easier and more efficient than another process. Oh, like this, I just hit it again. There we go. Alright, so now we've got 2 of them. We can just put the third one right in place like this. Oop, that wants to go over one, and here we are with the three seismic geologic sensors. Now, actually going through and reassembling this fairing, I'm probably going to have to move a couple things, because it's, doesn't look like it likes that, but we'll see. Oh yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I don't like how this fairing is sitting on here. Can I skip this piece? Let's see if I can skip that piece. No, I can't skip that piece. So I skipped that one. 3. Is that the largest fairing? That is the largest fairing. I don't know. I guess that works. That's fine with me. So we're going to do that, and then we will just cover the rest of this ship with a fairing. And we're going to need to put a separator or something on here, so let's just keep an eye on that. Now, we actually can start to neck this fairing down, and we should probably do that before we continue too much here. Something like that. Now let's not actually skip stages on the fairing here. Let's make it nice and orderly. What did I do? I went the wrong way. There we are. There we are. That looks nice, doesn't it? One more. Alright, so I need one more like that. Or do I? Can I fit this over there? I can actually fit that over there, but I feel like something's not right here because I should have a space, huh? Let's put this one down here and we'll use another one of the 6 fairings here, and then we can go back to basic parts and put that right there. Something still doesn't feel right. I feel like I'm missing a piece somewhere because I remember there only being one space at the bottom of this thing last time. I don't know. This seems to work. Alright, so now we need to actually do the launch stage of this rocket. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a similar setup to the actual, what am I looking for here? Oh, the mothership, let's say. And we're going to start the rocket, small, make it get bigger around the center of it, and then we'll neck it back down again. And the reason we're going to do that is so we can put a couple more of these RCS thrusters on this main stage. That way we can go through and make sure that it's easy to separate this thing and get it, all nice. Oh, what happened there? Do I have that piece? Yeah, I hate how these pieces disappear here. Sometimes it makes me wonder if I've done something wrong because they just disappear. Alright. It appears that we've got everything. I really am curious what I've done that I've got this extra space, but I don't see anything that I could have done wrong here. Unless it's just right at the top that the problem is. Nah. I don't know, we'll try this out. Next, we're going to put some side separators, and we're going to go back to our big parts here. And we're going to use these ones, right? We're going to use a stack of 3 here. And we're going to end up necking these down just a little bit because we sort of want to end up like keeping clear of the fairing. All right, so there we are. Next, we're going to need to put one of these just like that. And then we can go back to our basic, put one of these, and put, there we are, the point. So just like that, right there. Yeah, I still don't see anything. There's got to be something missing, but I don't know what it is. All right, so finally, we're just going to put a couple of boosters on here because basically what we have here is a fairly decent thrust to weight, even before these little side boosters. But what happens is I want to use the second or the third stage right here to actually start propelling this rocket towards Mars. And if we don't have these little tiny boosters here on the side, we end up running low on fuel, and we don't get as far towards Mars as I'd like, thus saving fuel in this system up here. So that's why we have the extra, and I believe now our big, gargantuan, ridiculous rocket to send things to Mars is done. Just one more quick look here. Yeah, this looks like everything. There's got to be something missing. I don't know what it is, though. Unless I started the fairing wrong. I could have done the fairing wrong. I don't know. But either way, we are ready to launch now. Please, launch. And as always, the first thing we have to do is we have to zoom out here to get a picture of this grand rocket for our thumbnail. Look at that thing. Isn't it such a beast? This is probably the biggest rocket we've launched here so far. All right, so turn our main stage thrust engines on, which is both of these big towers and the boosters. Then we go to the map, and we are looking for Mars. We want to get ourselves a nice transfer window to Mars, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to start by setting Mars as our target. Technically, we are going to be going to Deimos first rather than Mars, but well, we're going to set Mars as the target because it's going to be easier to actually head directly to Mars than it is to go to Deimos, because it's going to try to put us in a smaller window. You know what I'm saying? If we go straight to Deimos, we've got multiple different windows because we're trying to hit it as it goes around Mars. It's just easier to get a nice transfer window to Mars. So we need to wait until Earth is in the little gray zone here. So we're just going to accelerate some time. Please accelerate time. Thank you. Almost there. Right about here. Just a little bit further. Boom. And as soon as the Earth is in the zone, there we go. Now we're going to slow down time because it's time for the launch. All right, back here. Double check our engines because we have a ton of them. off. Okay, that one's off, which it should be. That one's on, and that one's on. All right, so we are ready to go. Now, we're going to do a standard gravity turn, just like we've done in the past. And I guess we're ready, so let's hit move on and listen to this rocket. And we're going to go here. We're going to follow this, and now we should be able to start turning. If we're a little bit late on our turn, it doesn't matter so much with this one because this is a nice heavy rocket. So what we want to do is make sure that we end up getting high enough, actually, and not like turning too quickly. Because if we turn too quickly, we're still going to be in the atmosphere here when we end up running out of thrust. And we want to save as much of our thrust for, in space where we're less affected by drag and whatnot. So just keep that in mind. If you're a little late on the turns, that's fine. But just a nice gravity turn over. Almost out of our thrusters, the little teeny thrusters. That's good. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to separate the thrusters and then we're going to lower the throttle, alright? Because we want to use our big main stage thrusters here to keep us gaining speed and not losing it. Separate these, we'll go, perfect. And we just want to keep gaining speed ever so slowly until we get to 25 kilometers, at which point when we're at 25 kilometers we can separate, nothing left to worry about there. Alright, and we can accelerate time until we are in space here. So here we are. What we're going to do is turn our engines off, accelerate some time, and we are right at the edge of the atmosphere. Boom. There we go. So what we want to do is separate both of those, turn our engine on, and then we want to zoom way in on this thing. That way we can separate it nice and easy without hitting any of our decouplers. Alright, there we go. And now we can do the final circularization burn. Now, if we want to be technical here, I don't think we fully need to circularize this. I believe we need to be close to circular to actually have the transfer window for Mars showing up here. Let's just go ever so slightly radial out to make sure that we're not creeping up on the apoapsis too much here. There we go. And we've got, what, 20 seconds-ish until we're fully circularized? Something like that. So we can probably go straight prograde here. Alright, here we go. You can see our apoapsis moving even though we are pretty much going entirely prograde. See, we don't need to entirely circularize. Let's actually lower our thrust. Bam. So we did manage to reach a nice circular orbit with just 30.8 kilometers, but we just really care about the gray zone there. So what we're going to do, we have about a half a tank of fuel left in this main stage here, the third stage, let's call it, and we're going to preemptively rotate ourselves around. There we are. Now let's accelerate time ever so slowly. And what we're going to do is wait until we're at the gray zone. We're going to boost, and we're going to use almost all of our fuel here. We're just going to have the slightest sliver left, and we're going to use that to deorbit this third stage here. So right about here, we want to just make sure we're in the perfect angle. There we go. So right as we are entering the gray zone. There we are. Now we're boosting. Now, see how this gray zone's moving? That's because we have so much thrust here. But that's okay. That just means we're going to be ever so slightly ahead of where we need to actually end up for the actual, what am I looking for here? Encounter with Mars. Let's say encounter with Mars, yes. Now, keep an eye on your fuel. Keep an eye on your apoapsis. When we see just a sliver of fuel left, we want to cut our engine. So I'm actually going to go and reduce the throttle here, just so I can more accurately, control this. So right about there. That looks perfect. You can just see a little teeny tiny bit of white. That's great. That's more than enough fuel to deorbit ourselves. Because remember, at our periapsis, we're only at 31.6 kilometers. So just a teeny tiny puff from this big engine is all we're going to need once we separate ourselves. So let's accelerate some time. We're going to go to the apoaps, and then we're going to separate our rockets. Something like this right here. All right, so go to the map. We are just barely before the apoaps, and press that to separate. That's perfect. All right, so what we need to do now is we need to switch to this. We need to make sure that we're not interfering with anything, and we're just going to puff a couple times with our RCS thrusters. We can accelerate ever so slightly through time here. There we go, just to make sure that we're out of the way. Now we will go to 100% throttle. Boom. There it is. Just a puff of fuel there, and see how we've got a nice intersect with the Earth? That's perfect. That is absolutely perfect. Now, we are going to actually launch ourselves to Mars. Or actually head to Mars here. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to turn both of these engines on. Make our throttle all the way up. Check my engines just to be sure. Because, we wouldn't want something like a misclick on the engines to actually determine how this mission goes, right? So we can accelerate through time again. And very slowly. We want to be careful this time because since we're heading back towards the planet, remember, we're picking up speed. So if you accelerate too fast, you just got to keep an eye on it because, our speed's picking up very rapidly and you can overshoot the transfer zone if you're not careful. So we just want to make sure that we don't overshoot the transfer zone. We want to go to just barely before the actual transfer zone and start burning. So probably right about here's good. Doesn't have to be that accurate. I mean, it's nice to be perfectly accurate, but perfectly accurate isn't going to happen. So you just make sure you're close, and that way it's a lot easier to actually get the transfer into Mars, basically. As always, once we start getting further away with our apoapsis, we're going to pick up speed much more rapidly. And we're just about out of orbit here. Oh, we got an encounter with the moon, but that's alright. Sometimes the moon will be in your way. You've got to be careful there. You've got to make sure that the moon doesn't, interfere with your actual transfer to Mars. Once you get close, remember to slow your throttle down because when you actually hit this, Mars has relatively a small sphere of influence, so you don't want to overshoot it and end up on the wrong side of the orbit. Alright, so here we are. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to 1%, and we want to have an orbit just inside of Deimos's orbit, basically. So I'm aiming for about 3,000 kilometers here, because I feel like 3,000 kilometers is probably pretty good as far as where we want to be. Because that's close enough right there. Once we actually get here, we're going to start with Deimos. We're going to basically detach the ship. We're going to reattach it, and then we're going to grab one of the different sensor modules, bring it down, land on Deimos, go back to the main ship, boost down to Mars, and then use the landing craft again to grab another module, head back to Phobos, drop the sensor, and then once again go back to the lander, not the lander, the mothership around Mars, and then after that, we'll actually land on Mars. We'll ditch the lander, we will, head back into space with a little ascent module, we'll take the mothership, we'll refuel everything, we should be just barely at enough fuel. Well, we'll probably have a little extra, but, when you consider the fact that we're going all through the solar system here to another planet and back, it's actually not that much fuel relatively. So here we go. We are almost at our encounter. And there it is. The nice encounter. Now, while we're here, we should probably slow down for just a second. We have entered orbit around the sun. What we want to do is we want to check our periaps here and make sure it hasn't moved too much, and then we want to go and refuel both of these thrusters here, because we are going to need approximately 2/3 of their fuel to actually circularize ourselves around Mars here. So there we are. We have refueled them. We're at 79% fuel in the the big tank. All right, and now we can make sure we're following this thing again. We could also, while we're right here, rotate it too. Let's do that. There we go. Something like this right here. Now we can accelerate through time some more. Mars will come up behind us and scoop us up. There we are. Perfect. And here's the encounter. We are now in Mars's atmosphere. And we are going to go until just inside of Deimos's orbit, and then we're going to start slowing ourselves down. We don't want to wait too long because it is going to be a fairly decent-sized burn to actually get ourselves captured in Mars's orbit here. So we're going to point slightly radial out relative to Mars. That should raise our periapsis a little bit, and then we can turn on our thrusters. There we are. See how that's raising ever so slightly. That'll help us get a nice stable 3,000 kilometer orbit. Our periapsis is rising towards Mars's orbit. So that's going very good. We may actually end up getting a second Mars approach here if we are careful. But we shouldn't need it. We should be good here. Just check on our orbit. Yeah, we've almost reached 3,000 kilometers. So once we do that, I'm going to slow our throttle down, and I'm going to turn back towards retrograde here to try and keep it nice and steady. So something like that. There we go. That's pretty much perfectly on retrograde. See how we're just ever so slightly losing altitude on the periaps? That's okay. And if we just keep bouncing back and forth here between radial in and slightly radial out, we can sort of keep our periaps in about the same location. We're just about to enter Mars's sphere of influence here. Alright, there we go. So now we are at a point where we can no longer maintain raising our periapsis. So we're just going to sit right here for a second, and then we're going to accelerate through time again. We're going to go close to the periapsis this time, and that should allow us to better control our periaps. We want to go slightly radial out again. There we go. We should be making orbit any second now. There we are. We have entered Mars's orbit. We're going to go radial out again. Alright, we can just finish circularizing ourselves here. Alright. Now remember, I want to try and get an absolutely perfectly circular orbit. It's not going to matter that much in the grand scheme of things. It'll help a little bit when we're trying to rendezvous with a spacecraft later, but when we start separating things and using the RCS thrusters and bumping into pieces when we dock together, it's going to change our altitude off the planet just a little bit. So there we are. Now, what we can do is we can go down to like 11%, turn ourselves around ever so, well, not really ever so slightly. I mean, we are going 180 degrees here. And we can just raise the periaps up to about 3,000. And we're just tapping the on-off button. So there it is, 3,000 by 3,005. That should be good. All right, now, here's the point where I would recommend that you save. However, there is an issue with this craft, and I don't know what it is. I can't figure it out. But basically, if you save in this configuration here, what happens is this top docking port of the final module is like deactivated, and no matter what, I haven't been able to figure out a way to actually redock with this, which basically renders this seismic unit here, completely useless. And I don't know why. So it is a good idea to save, but I would caution you just because there's some sort of issue with the game, and I don't know what it is. I personally am not going to save this. I'm going to live on the edge. I'm going to go through and I'm going to, complete the mission on one save file here. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the mission right here once we get fully refueled. So there we are. And the next time when we return, what we're going to do is we're going to visit Deimos, Phobos, and land on Mars with our modules. And we're going to go through and drop these off and hopefully not crash. And, the rest of it. So thank you all so much for watching. My name's Xeriua, and this is the Nocturnal Gaming Network bringing you Spaceflight Simulator. Have yourselves a wonderful night, everybody.